Welcome to the story of HM Factory Gretna and the unique railway system that served it. You're looking at the Sir James, which was one of 14 fireless locomotives supplied by Andrew Barclay of Kilmarnock. They were used to safely transport the volatile Devil's Porridge paste the 9 miles from the Dornock site in Scotland to Mossband in England, where it was processed into cordite propellant. Unlike conventional steam engines, fireless locomotives had no fire on board to cause sparks, which could potentially cause explosions, but were charged up with steam from an external boiler before setting off. After the HM factory Gretna was closed in 1924, the Sir James was sold to the Metropolitan Electric Power Supply Company at Brimsdown Generating Station. It was also sold later to Fleetwood Power Station and then transferred to the Lakeland and Haverfordwest Railway before the Devil's Porridge Museum acquired the badly rusting engine in 2011. The engine was renovated in 2014 by John Hope Engineering. These lovely black and white photographs show the Sir James in service at HM Factory Gretna during the latter years of the First World War. So what exactly was HM Factory Gretna? And also, what was the Devil's Porridge? Well, to answer those questions, we need to step back to the early years of the First World War. In 1915, Germany seemingly had the advantage, which was turning the war in its favour. Allied soldiers were fighting gallantly, but their supplies of ammunition were being carefully rationed. When knowledge of this shortage reached Britain, the government was forced to give way to a new political coalition, and the newly appointed Minister of Munitions, David Lloyd George, was tasked with ensuring a sufficient supply of ammunition to the front. One of his first actions to end the shell crisis was the creation of the greatest munitions factory in the world, HM Factory Gretna. To create the factory at Gretna, experts were recruited from all corners of the empire. There were explosives experts from South Africa, chemists from New Zealand and Australia, as well as engineers from Canada. 10,000 Irish navvies were recruited to complete the massive task of completing the project in double quick time. The site itself was spread over 9 miles and would manufacture 800 tons of cordite every week. There were 125 miles of railway track and a 10.6 megawatt coal-fired power station. A pumping station would be built on the River Esk and a water treatment works at the nearby village of Kirkpatrick Fleming, together with a 12 million gallon reservoir. At first, wooden huts were built for the construction workers, but as the factory site took shape, 2 new townships were built to house the workers at the factory. One was built at Eastriggs and the other at Gretna. They remain largely unchanged to this day. These new townships were planned by the architect Raymond Unwin, who had co-designed Letchworth Garden City in Hertfordshire, and the townships at Eastriggs and Gretna were built along Garden City principles with wide, tree-lined avenues, large gardens, sweeping crescents, and cul-de-sacs. Numerous facilities were built for the workers, such as a dentist, a hospital, bakeries, tennis courts, bowling greens, cinemas, dance halls, institutes, laundries, canteens, and several shops. There were also 5 impressive churches, which were constructed to a high standard of design, and recreational departments organised activities and events to keep the workers entertained. At its height, there were 30,000 workers at HM Factory Gretna. Some were working in the ongoing construction, while others worked in the operational factory. 12,000 women worked in the operational plant, many successfully carrying out skilled work which had previously been carried out by men who were away fighting in the war. The girls were recruited from across the British Isles. 80% of them were single, and 62% of them were aged 18 and under. These stoneware basins were used to mix acid and waste cotton to make nitrile cotton, which is one of the first stages of producing cordite. In the plant at Eastriggs, the nitroglycerine and nitrile cotton were blended together into a paste. This toxic blend was mixed by women with wooden paddles, or even their bare hands. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle coined the phrase the devil's porridge after seeing the girls mixing the chemicals in the porridge pots. A number of brick-built hostels for production workers and houses for senior staff were quickly erected. The hostels were named after famous people such as Edith Cavell, Walter Scott, or Robert the Bruce, and they were split into cubicles for the workers. They were designed to be converted into family houses after the war. Each hostel had a matron, supported by cleaning and kitchen staff. One female worker remembered, "It's a kind of lady's life in a way." The Devil's Porridge Museum at Eastriggs contains a recreation of what it was like inside one of the Gretna Girls' bedrooms. The new townships at Gretna and Eastriggs were situated about 5 miles apart, but owing to there being no means of transport, friendships that were formed inside the various parts of the site were unable to be developed socially. Therefore, to meet this drawback and assist generally in promoting social intercourse between the two townships, a rail service was introduced, which proved of great benefit. A number of social facilities were introduced for employees across the site in connection with entertainment, dances, and even football matches. Well, I've taken a walk to the village of Dornock, just outside Eastriggs, where there are some of the original track still in place that connected the Glasgow South Western Main Line into the HM Gretna complex. The site of HM Factory Gretna was chosen partly because of its proximity to three principal Scottish railway systems. The whole area was originally agricultural land, so temporary sidings were created to receive construction materials. While the factory was being constructed, an internal rail system was simultaneously created to move materials and workers. There were 16 stations with 125 miles of rail track. We're looking now at the original site of Dornock Station. And it was through the village of Dornock that raw materials came in to the complex and went through various phases of manufacture in the different sections until the finished cordite was handed over to the North British Railway Company at Longtown. Of the 16 stations across the whole of the HM Gretna site, one served the workers living in Gretna. Three served the workers coming by different railway company trains, and so were situated so that the workers had a very short distance to walk to the factory trains. The remaining 11 stations were for the distribution of the workers to the different units where they worked. 3 stations were situated across from the various compounds, and all were within a 2-minute walk. There were a mixture of goods wagons and passenger coaches using the factory's railway system. During the year 1917, the factory received nearly 90,000 wagons, on average around 1,700 every week, while the same number was returned, a proportion of which were loaded with products and byproducts of the factory. At Dornock, raw materials such as nitrate of soda, sulphur, crude glycerine, cotton waste, coal, and general stores were brought onto the site. At Gretna Green, coal for the powerhouse and township and catering supplies, as well as supplies for the central kitchens and bakery. At Gretna Village, alcohol, coal, and timber. At Mossband, there was empty cordite cases, coal, and general stores, while at Longtown, coal was the principal item received there, and at this point the finished cordite was handed to the railway company. Looking at passenger services, there was a total of 62 scheduled passenger trains every day. The number of passengers carried in 1917 alone was 5 million. There were 24 steam locomotives, 14 fireless locomotives, 95 bogie paste vans, 54 covered railway vans, 372 open wagons, 174 nitrocake wagons, and 87 six-wheeled passenger coaches in use on the railway network. At the top of the picture, you can see where the Glasgow South West Main Line meets the former HM Gretna railway network at Dornock. This map shows the extensive railway network as it looked in 1917 at the western end of the HM Gretna site at Dornock. This plan shows the new layout of the township at Gretna, complete with hospital, doctor's house, tennis court and bowling green, along with a bakery and a primary school. In the town of Gretna itself, there's a number of memorials commemorating the heroic part that the Gretna Girls played in this operation. I particularly like this commemorative statue that was commissioned by Gretna and Eastriggs Community Council back in 2016 in recognition of the important role of the munition workers in this area during World War I. While HM Factory Gretna undoubtedly achieved great things, they came at a cost. As a result of their contact with the chemicals involved, many workers suffered from a type of jaundice, which coloured their skin and turned the whites of their eyes yellow. Here are the memorials in place at the villages of Dornock and Eastriggs, commemorating those who laid down their lives for this country in the First World War, as well as the people who lived and worked at HM Factory Gretna. Building HM Factory Gretna was a remarkable achievement. It took only 9 months, and within a year of its opening, it was producing more cordite than all of the other factories in Britain combined. The factory complex itself was 9 miles long and 2 miles wide, and the total cost of building the site was nearly £22 million. 400 RAF personnel were based on the 200-acre site, including Dennis Hurricane David, who instructed new recruits in Hawker Hurricanes. Spurred on by the thought of brothers and boyfriends fighting on the front line, the munitions girls worked harder and harder to feed the hungry guns and win the war. After the war, operations wound down and the workers returned to their homes. A government inquiry initially recommended that HM Factory Gretna be kept open. However, politicians decided that the massive amount of cordite which the munitions girls had toiled to produce would no longer be needed, and in August 1921, the great factory was deemed surplus to requirements. It was a decision that would be regretted when, by 1939, the Second World War broke out.